There's a label Gen X gets stuck with all over social media. The most conservative generation, slow to adapt to new things, quick to be skeptical of every trend, stuck to old ways of doing things, even as the world moves on. But if you ask an actual Gen Xer why they are that way, the answer is rarely, because I'm afraid of change. The answer is usually something closer to, because I've already learned what it costs to trust something new too quickly. The so-called conservatism people see in Gen X isn't stubbornness for its own sake. It's a defense mechanism built from watching things that once seemed absolutely certain suddenly fall apart. Before we go further, if this is already hitting on something familiar, take a second to subscribe to Labyrinth Psychology. This is where we explore the psychology quietly shaping who we become. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. I knew a woman named Marcy who worked as an accountant for 26 years at a small to mid-sized company. Younger coworkers used to tease her for still printing out invoices to double-check them by hand, even after the company had fully switched to a digital system. They called her old school, sometimes as a joke, sometimes with a hint of impatience. Marcy never explained herself much, but if you asked her directly, she'd tell you that back in the early 2000s, she worked for a company that put total trust in a new financial management system, dropping all the old manual checks entirely. 6 months later, a small system glitch caused the company to lose track of a wave of transactions for nearly 2 weeks, resulting in serious losses. From then on, she always kept one layer of manual verification, no matter how advanced the technology got. To an outsider, that looks like stubbornness. To Marcy, it was a lesson she never intended to learn twice. Gen X grew up and came of age through one wave of instability after another: the energy crisis, the early 90s recession, the dot-com bubble collapse in the early 2000s, and the 2008 financial crisis. Every single time, they watched something get hailed as the future, an inevitable trend, only to watch it collapse or cause serious damage afterward. In psychology, there's a concept sometimes called risk confirmation bias. When a person who has personally experienced negative consequences from trusting something new too quickly develops a brain that automatically prioritizes caution in similar situations later, even when the new situation isn't actually dangerous at all. This isn't rigid thinking. It's a survival mechanism that's been repeatedly validated by real experience. The problem is that this mechanism sometimes fires even when it isn't needed. So from the outside, all people see is resistance, without seeing the layer of history sitting underneath it. Here's something even more interesting. A lot of Gen Xers don't actually resist change in general. They've adapted to an enormous number of new technologies over their lifetime. Desktop computers, cell phones, social media. What they actually resist isn't the new thing itself. It's change that hasn't been verified yet. They want to see proof, want to see it tested, before putting their full trust in it. This is what the label conservative tends to miss. Calling someone conservative implies they're rejecting change out of fear or a lack of flexibility. But for a lot of Gen Xers, that caution doesn't come from fear at all. It comes from real experience teaching them that not everything new is automatically better than what came before, and not every promise about the future actually comes true. What outsiders call clinging to the old ways is sometimes simply a form of accumulated intelligence, the ability to tell the difference between a genuinely lasting trend and a fad that's about to disappear. If you belong to this generation, you've probably been called resistant to change, overly skeptical, or unable to keep up with the times. But maybe what's actually happening isn't that you're afraid of the new. Maybe you've simply learned, through repeated real experience, that selective caution is how you protect everything you've worked hard to build. And if you belong to a different generation, looking at a Gen Xer in your life, puzzled by their caution, maybe the question worth asking isn't, why won't they change? Maybe it's, what did they go through that made them this careful in the first place? Gen X isn't the most conservative generation because they're afraid of the future. They're simply the generation that learned, from watching so many certainties collapse, that trust has to be earned through proof, not handed out on the strength of a promise. If this video touched on something familiar to you, share your own story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Labyrinth Psychology as we continue uncovering the quiet truths that have shaped who we are.